Let's start recording. Okay, so let's move on to the next set of method. So for the next set of method, so we have discussed constructor. We also discussed accessors, is it? And the third category of operations in class is mutators. Is it? Or setters. Is it? And if you take a look over here, we have a method called set type. Is it? The return type is void. Is it? And it's also defined as public accessibility. And it has parameter list. Is it? And if you take a closer look, you will find this looks like what? The explicit value constructor. Is it? It just assign whatever the variable, whatever the parameter value is it to your instance variables, is it? So that's why we call it mutators, setters, is it? Because it can update the values of instance variables. So what they do is they assign values from arguments, is it, to instance variables. That's what they did, is it? And for this one, we assign all three. So you can also do individually, like just hour or just minute or just AM, PM. Here, I just use one example, just set hour, is it? Just assign the hour value, is it, from parameter. So generally speaking, parameter on right side, is it? Instance variable on the left side. Be careful, okay, they are all on left side. Don't do the other way, okay, because in the past, some students just reverse. For the parameter, put it on the left, and your instance variable put on the right. That's not correct, okay? What here we try to achieve is to assign value from the parameter then to instance variable. Is it? So who is on the left, who is on the right? We need to get it clear. And generally speaking, we should also do validation. Validation, is it? So that means if like the P hour, is it? It should greater than 0, is it? And less than less or equal than 12. Then it's legal value. Then you can do assignment, is it? Yeah, that's just so here we just simplify. So the next method, let's take a look at the toString method. And basically this method, later on we will say, okay, it's overriding method, and the method original is from class object, is it? So what this method does is it returns some string, is it? And the general use for this method a lot of time is you want to output the object. The object. Is this to simplify? Then in that case is we can provide a method. We call it a toString, is it? And if you take a look, what it does is it try in this case to provide certain formatted output for our time objects, is it? So it's kind of look like it's try to output as suppose 12, 10, AM. As they try to format the time object output like this. So that's why they try to output hour value, is it? And then colon, then minute, is it? And then the AM, PM, and whatever. So a formatted output. that you want your objects be output look like that, then you can provide this method, is it? And if you take a look, is it over here? Here it also has toString. So later on we will see a lot of toString, is it? Any class, generally speaking, you can provide a toString, because if you don't provide, after we learn inheritance, you will also see object class, the root class of all Java objects. It has a method called toString, is it? But here, you don't want to use that root one, whatever it's defined. You want to define your own version, is it, to reflect of your object's instance variable. Then you can do something like this, is it? And what here we did is we output everything, is it? So we build this string and then let this string be returned, is it? Okay, so that's the toString class. And basically this method, if we category, it belongs to what? To accessor. It's not a mutator, is it? Because it's just get all of the instance variables values. So it belongs to a getter category. Okay, so that's what this method. And then let's take a look over here. Let's come back here. The number of times, is it this? We said it's a class variable. Is a class variable, because over here we have the static, is it? And if you take a look, we initialize here it to be 0. And the purpose is to count the number of time objects created, is it? So of course it starts at 0, is it? And if you take a close look, you will find in the constructor, each time we increment by 1, is it? By 1 in constructor, is it? And when constructor is get called, and how many times a constructor get called? So constructor is called when object is created, and it can only get called once. Okay, not like a get and a setter, not like an accessor and a mutator. Accessor and mutator, they can be called on a single object multiple times, but to construct you only can call it once. Is it? Because like the manufacturer, is it? To manufacture an object, is it only called once? And this class variable is purpose to count the number of objects created. So that's why it is incremented by 1 in this constructor, is it? And we also, so for the second constructor, we also increment by 1, is it? Oh, and before we move on, then let's take another look of this two method. If you take a look, this two method has some special thing, is it? So the methods have same name, is it? But what? But with different signatures, is it? So how can a method have the same name? If the method has the same name, when you call the method, then which one is going to use, is it? So how do we differentiate this? Why this is allowed, is it? So this is a concept, we call it what? Method overloading. Overload. You overload a method. What that means? So in a class definition or even in main, you can define a method, have the same name, but they have different parameter list, and the return type can also be different. That's what we call they have different signature. So when the method is invoked, it will depend on how you invoke it. Okay, so remember this is a very quite useful term in programming. Okay, called method or function overloading. Okay, what that means, I just give the definition. And because programming language allows this, it allows method or function overloading, so this is legal, is it? So that's why constructors, they all have the same name, is it? But the parameter must be the same. You cannot have two exactly the same. That's not allowed, okay? Okay, so this is regarding overloading definition. And then let's take a look. This last method, get a number of time, is it? And if you take it, it has accessibility, return type, method name, parameter, is it? But it has another keyword, static. If we take a look of our getter, setter, toString, there is no static. Is it? Notice that they are called what? They are called instance methods. So be careful, okay? Instance method, no static. This method is called class method. And it has a keyword, static. And do you still remember what other static method we learned so far? The most common one that you use each time you write the Java program is a main method. Is that you remember main method is also a static method. You must have the static. Okay, so this method is a static, it has a static, so it's a class method. Okay, and what it does, it deals with that class variable, number of times, just return. So this is also accessor, is it? But it's class accessors. Okay, so we know this. Then let's take a look. Can you now all see my? I just switched to the Java class example 1. Did all of you see this? Okay, it's good. Okay,
You can see it.
Okay, you can see it. Is it the main method? Is it? You see that? Okay, good. I'm just because I don't know if you all can see it. Then let's take a look. Okay, so in that Java time.java class, in that file, is it we define time class, is it? And this is a different class. Is it? If you take a look at our project, this is a different one, is it? And this class, it has a main method, is it? Main method, you will see it's also static, is it? And with this class, all method is a static method, is it? And for this, so if the class has a main method, generally we call this an application program, an app program, or we call it a driver. Okay, call it a driver, because you are going to use this to create your application. Okay, so let's see this time. The very first line is just output, just call the print line, is it? What do we call here? Okay, we said, okay, we want to know how many time objects create. And do you still remember we have that get number of time? Is it get number of time? That's a class method. And how do we call it? Okay, we mention class name here. So class name, then dot, then you call that method. Is it? Yeah. So we will have some value. Is it? In this case, what you will get? because you haven't created any object. So you will get that default value 0. Is it 0? Okay, then next, second line. Over here, T1. T1 is what? Is a variable. This variable type is of a time class. Is it? So this variable is a time type. Is it? But after that, what do? We call new time. What does this mean? This time, parenthesis is what? Is time class that default constructor. Is it? So over here, so each time when you call constructor, is it you do new, then constructor name. Is it? And semicolon. Is it? So you do need to have this new, okay? So what this line does is it create. So it's just like a manufacturer, okay? It's create a time object, or we call it a time instance. Okay, and then this time instance object is associated with variable T1. Okay, so basically T1 reference to the time object. Okay, you must create it, then you associate it. So what happens here, if you recall in array unit, we set the stack memory, and we also set the heap memory. Is it? So T1 is on stack. Is it? And the new time. So this is new time. Is it? It creates a time object. So basically, this is a time object. It's created on heap. So whenever call new, some object created on heap, and then T1 reference to it. Okay, that's what it happened. Okay, and then over here, I print something. That I print what? I want to print out, I want to know what T1's time is. Is it? So I call T1 dot toString. Is it? And the toString is what? Is instance variable. So it must go with some instance. And here I do have instance T1. So that's why you can call T1 dot toString. You cannot do this, okay? If you do this, it's wrong. If you said, oh, how about I call time dot toString? That's wrong. That's not allowed because to instance, it's instance method. It's an instance method. It must do some instance dot. So T1 dot is allowed. Okay, the get number time, that's a class method. That's why you can just use the class name because it belongs to class. It doesn't belong to T1. Okay, but toString, this toString belong to T1. Okay, so this is just like your car. You can do accelerator. So that accelerator belongs to your car. And my car, I do accelerator operation. That belongs to my car. Okay, so that's, but just think about number of car. It doesn't belong to you, your car or my car. It belongs to that manufacturer. Is it like a Ford or Toyota? Is it? So that's the difference here. And then next, let's see the next one. Then over here, this one, let me put it here. And then let's see, the next line, I have T2, is it? And then I call new time again. But this time I call what? With that explicit value constructor. Is it? So you plug in the hour, the minute, and AM, PM. So this is the second instance, is it? So regarding our stack memory and the heap memory, is it? So heap and stack. Is it? You have T2, you have T1. So T1, you have an object associated. And T2, you have another object. Is it? So T1 is 12 AM. And this is 8:30 AM, is it? So they associate with each corresponding one, is it? And then here, did you see a T2 dot get hour? And you can also call T2 dot set time, is it? So dot set, but it's what? It's all on T2 objects. Okay, so here just be careful, okay? So accessor and the mutators, whenever you call, it's on objects. You cannot do time dot get hour, time dot set time. You cannot do that. You can only do T1 dot get hour, T2 dot get hour, T1 dot set time, T2 dot set time. Okay, so be very careful. Yeah, please.
You said T2 dot set time. That would be an instance method, right?
Yeah.
And then time dot get num time.
What
would that be?
That is called method? Class method.
Okay.
So you cannot call T2 dot get. You can still call that. That is still allowed. But the value doesn't specifically belong to T2.
Right.
You can still call that. But for instance, so the other way is not allowed. You cannot call time dot set time. You cannot. That makes sense? So the set time can only happen on either T1 or T2 or T3. On whatever you have the new, because you do have this object. So basically, the dot get hour happens on this. That makes sense? For time, you don't have the block here on heap. That makes sense? Time is not an object. It's just a class name. It's like a car. Whenever you see car, that's just the word car, concept, is it? Your car is physically exist. So your accelerator or decelerate or you turn, you make turn, all of those happens on your car, is it on that specific car? But the number of car, it doesn't belong to your car or my car, is it? When it does want to do the counting of the car, it's the manufacturer going to do that job, is it? So that makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, then you see after you call set time, because T2 initially set as 7:30 AM, but then I reset it to 59 AM, is it? If you call get hour, you will see the time got changed, is it? So that's why we see set function, setter, is it? What it does is it's to update your instance variable. You can modify your instance variable's value. That's why it's called mutator. Because when this object initially creates at 8:30, this is kind of like you buy your car from manufacturer. It has some default settings, is it? And then later on, you can change your car's car. You can repaint it, is it? You can add some like a spoiler, is it? Or you can add some other fancy electronic in your car. You can customize it. You can put new carpets, and you can maybe add some fancy audio system, is it? So all of those are called mutator. You can change, is it not? To use the default manufacturer's default settings, is it? So that's why we call them all a mutator. And then for T1, T2, you can also get the output, is it? Then you can call that toString method. So far, how about all of this? This makes sense?
I think conceptually it all makes sense, but I feel like I probably won't really understand how to use it until I actually start trying to figure it out.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you start your lab, you will understand it much better. Conceptually, you understand, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. Okay, and then let me, okay, right now ask you this question. That may be a good time to answer. So after the, I call time T1 dot at equal new time, if at this time I add this system dot dot print line, I said, okay, time object created, then plus time dot get num time. What do you think you will get the output? Anyone knows the answer? Over here, we say initially it's 0, is it? After I call time T1 equal new time, and then I copy this line here, the system data branch line, time object created plus time dot get num. So what will be the output you think it will have?
1.
Yeah, very good. It's 1. Yeah, it's 1, is it? Okay, now here I have T2, is it? And I do a lot of things. And then same thing, I copy again that line, is it? And then I do time dot get number time. Then what will it be?
2.
Very good. Yeah, 2. It will be 2, is it? So each time, is it? Did you see? You never call T1 dot get number or T2. You just call time dot get, is it? And of course, you can also try T1 dot get number or T2. It will do the same thing. You will still get 1 or 2, is it? No matter it's T1 or T2, because this method belongs to the time class. So it will give you that value from that class variable, okay? So that's the general idea about the time class. And we running out of time, okay, today. Let me check the chat. I will